for choosing to be here this morning. It's great. I thought this morning we might talk a little bit about spiritual practice, because that is really in unity kind of the main thing that we talk about and we learn about and we read about and we practice. So the first quote is, you probably have heard this joke, right? Can you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Have you heard that? Yeah. It's kind of common. And it kind of, for me, conjures up thoughts of, your mother telling you, oh, go and practice. So maybe you were taking piano lessons or whatever. For me, it was baton twirling. Just kind of dating myself, because that's what was popular in the 50s. Everybody had a little baton twirling. You went to lessons, believe it or not.
That was fun.
It was fun, right. And you were majorette in the band, all that kind of stuff. So, but I really liked doing it, and I liked practicing it. I used to go down in the cellar and practice, and then when it was really nice, if it was a nice day, I could go out in the backyard and practice tossing and catching it. So this quote, I kind of looked this up because I really didn't know who had said it, even though I'd heard the thing a lot. And it's credited to several people, but on their website for Carnegie Hall, it credits this man, Jacek Hafis, who's a violinist. And the story that his wife told about this was that of course, Carnegie Hall is huge. It's this big building, and it takes up like a whole city block or more in New York City. And so he had just had a performance at Carnegie Hall, and there are many venues there, several big rooms, and they do just an immense amount of things. And so he had a performance, and they were leaving by one of the backstage doors. And as they were leaving, some tourists who were trying to find their way in came up and said, "Can you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall?" And his wife said he didn't miss a beat. He said, "Practice," just like that. It just kind of became this joke that's been just told and told and told. And of course, like most jokes, it has a lot of truth in it. Because no matter what you take up, in order to get really good at what you're doing, you do need to practice, practice, practice. And we know that in unity. Our main things in unity are meditation, prayer, or I should say affirmative prayer, and of course affirmations. And we have workshops where we learn how to write affirmations and denials, where we learn how to speak positively, big training to be a prayer chaplain here, where you learn really how. I know that was, when I joined Unity, I just hadn't heard about that. I never even thought, was I speaking negatively or positively? And of course, to my great surprise, I realized I had a lot of negative thoughts going on. And then you kind of go through that process where you learn not to say them, but they're still in your head.
Oh no, say it.
Like, oh my goodness, In fact, sometimes they're kind of like right on the tip of your tongue. Have you had that experience? Mm-hmm. And you just want to say it because you're used to saying it. But you realize that you're practicing being different. And so you kind of swallow those or, do whatever you do with them, get rid of them, And so, of course, there's a beautiful quote later on, we're going to get to that, about Myrtle, and she always said, watch your thoughts. You have to be on guard all the time, because these thoughts just kind of, and they could be from, growing up, or some teacher, or something you see, or whatever. These kind of negativity, it's just there. It's a part of living on the planet in duality. We're here and we're experiencing duality, and so we're experiencing not just the good, but also the other things that are opposite of that. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, about spiritual practice, and maybe some of the things that come up when we're doing our spiritual practice. Those are the three sort of main things, but really, when you talk about spiritual practice, anything is a spiritual practice if your goal is to unite with the presence, to come into that presence, to let go of the earthly things that are surrounding you, to let go of your negativity or whatever is keeping you from being your full self. That's kind of the goal of spiritual practice. So everything becomes really then a spiritual practice. And many people have written about that, about how to make things a spiritual practice. And one of the ways that I do that is I've looked in my life at the things that I didn't like to do, because that's where your challenges are, right? So one of the things I don't like to do is dishes. It's boring. Sometimes in my life I've had a dishwasher, and then that was kind of good because you could put them in there, and then somebody else did the work for you, this machine. But I don't have a dishwasher now, and after all, it's just me there. So one of the things I did for my spiritual practice was to, of course, let go of that resistance of the dishes and kind of make it a meditative space. And that's not my idea. That was in Practicing the Presence book, of making those chores a spiritual practice. And to help me with that, that's where I put my bird feeder outside of my lawn, so I can look out and make sure it's all filled up and have all these wonderful birds come. And I've learned so much about their habits and things like that while I was doing the dishes, and really seeing them as creatures of God. It was really marvelous. So there's many ways, I'm sure each of you have little spiritual practices that you do that kind of help you stay in the moment with the task that you're doing, to see the beauty of the world in a dish and in the birds. Another spiritual practice that I read about that I do is when you're going through a doorway is always metaphysically a threshold. So when you're going through a doorway, it's like you're going towards something, some change is happening. And since we do want to be moving in our lives, if you pause at the threshold, like when your hand is on the doorknob, and just check in with Spirit, it's a place where you and Spirit can meet. Even if you've gotten up and been rushed all morning, and you just pause and put your hand on the doorknob. I have got some of the best guidance ever when I've done that. I started doing it as a way to kind of check in and see if I forgot anything when I left the house. But gradually, it became a lot more than that. It became just a few minutes of what I might need for that day. Things like, don't be afraid. And I wouldn't even realize that I had been worrying or being afraid, but then that guidance would come. And it comes to all of us differently. Sometimes it is a voice. Sometimes it's like a remembering, or just like a feeling that you have, and you get a mood or something from it. And that's one of my favorite things that I really do, is to just pause right there at the doorway. It also, at times in my life when I've been very busy, has helped to slow me down. So gradually you realize that you're doing these things, but then as you keep doing them and keep practicing, more and more things come up for you. So I would be interested in what you do for spiritual practice. Talk to me in fellowship about what is it that we all do for spiritual practice. It'd be great if we could have a sharing time around that, because sometimes what you do might be able to help somebody else. Our next quote is from Joseph Campbell, one of my favorites. We must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. So, of course, this speaks to something that's necessary, I think, at the beginning of any spiritual practice, and that's surrender. And we also, the daily work was about letting go. Isn't that cool? Don't you just love it when that happens, So that surrender is very important. And that's up for me again in my life now, because I just joined the Transformation Room, which is a new program that the Course in Miracles has through the Teachers of God Foundation. And so you get this, you study something for a whole month, and you get downloads and all this kind of stuff. So the first month is surrender. So I get another opportunity to look at that. Something that's probably been very hard for me, because I have a tendency to just make my plan and kind of go my own way. My son, when he went to Sudbury Valley, which is a private school, and you kind of give a thesis when you're ready to graduate from high school there. And all the students and the teachers come and you present your thesis. And they have the same questions for everybody every year. And it's, why did you want to graduate at this time? you talk about your activities and how that applies to your life at Sudbury Valley, and then it's what are you going to do, apply these things to the greater world and the greater community. That's kind of in a nutshell. It's been a little while since I did that. And so he had a t-shirt that he had gotten that I had never seen that day. And on the t-shirt it says, "Make no plans." And I just sat there, it was so amazing, something that I was still working on learning. And there's my son with a t-shirt on and his high school thesis saying, "Make no plans." And I thought, wow, I need a t-shirt like that. But I was also very gratified and very, very grateful that my son had had the opportunity to be in a school like that, where there weren't a lot of rules and where they weren't encouraged to make plans, but they were really encouraged to be in the moment. And it gave me great hope, for the world to just see that t-shirt, on my son that day, It was so different than my growing up. And sometimes we think, oh, there's all this stuff out there in the world, and the world is going to pot. If you hear people say that, oh my God, it's just awful, it's not like it was in my time, and stuff like that. I am just so gratified when I look out there and see, because there are so many wonderful changes that are taking place. And when you look at those, you just see that, yes, we are truly headed in the right direction. Most of you know I'm a massage therapist, and I had this client once, and she came in on a regular basis, and this one day she came in, she was so happy because her daughter had gotten a scholarship to college for basketball. And my mouth was just hanging open, and I said, when I went to high school, we had women's basketball. And she said, well, what was that? And I said, well, we had guards and forwards. And the big long basketball court where you were either a forward or a guard. And you could only go halfway. And when you got to that line in the middle, you had to pass it to the other girls, and then they put the ball in. So you were either that. And I remember asking when I was a teenager, why didn't we play basketball like I did in my neighborhood, where everybody just ran all around and put the ball in if they had it? And the gym teacher said, oh, well, girls aren't supposed to run fast and they can't run that whole length. And I said, well, I can do that. Really, we had girls basketball. And how do you think we are going to get strong and run and do all the things if we don't have the opportunity to run a full court? I can remember so many times when I was just there and I would get to that line and I'd be just getting up a good head of steam to go all the way, and I had to stop. What kind of life lesson is that for someone? So I know that things are changing, because here, a client of mine, her daughter is in college now on a basketball scholarship. So things had to come a long ways for that, So if you ever despair about it or find yourself thinking that things aren't going, they are, and there's examples in every one of our lives where we can see that. Yes, amen. So our next quote is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he says, with the past I have nothing to do, nor with the future. I live in the now. And this is definitely one of the practices that we work on here at Unity, and that's living in the present moment. And how's that going for most folks? I said, do I really want that quote in there or tackle that one? So it's good to know that it's not going so well, not just for me, but for other people too, living in the present moment. Yes. When I first started to meditate, it was actually before Unity, and I was doing it through yoga and yoga class and everything. And really, I just couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. And my mind would just be flooded with the amazing things that I had to do that I was sure was absolutely necessary for that day. You had to do those things. So I think this is a real challenge for a lot of us, and that's to kind of live and be right in that present moment. I think for a long time I didn't even know what that present moment was, because I did either live in the past or in the future. I was always either worried about something that I had done or concerned about something that I had to do. That's where I lived, you know. And I remember going to workshops and people talking about living in the present moment, and I thought, well, what is that, you know? What is that present moment? What is that like? What does that mean for everyone to live in that present moment? For me, it's being that few minutes, seconds, or whatever, when you're absolutely positively know that you're connected with that God moment. One of the first times that happened to me was when I took my second-degree Reiki training. And during that time, they give you an attunement. It's for those of you who don't know about it, it's a type of healing. It's really a path of enlightenment, but it's really a path of healing where you learn to use the Reiki energy. And so they give you an attunement. It's done by initiation, meaning you're taught from the master, gives you the attunement. You have books, of course, but it really isn't that kind of a thing. It's the one thing, I think, in this country that's done by initiation. We're pretty much into going and having books and tests and giving certificates that way. So during my attunement, there was a period when my hands were in front of my heart center like this. And then she moved them out just slightly. And when she did that for the part of the attunement, the love inside my heart came out and hit my hands. I could feel it. It was actually a physical thing. And then it bounced back to my heart. And I realized that I had felt my own love for myself. And that was probably about, I think, how long have I been? Maybe 30 years ago that I did that. And of course I've had many challenges since then and many dark days, as we all do. But they made those dark days much easier for me because I knew that even if I wasn't in touch with that presence, that love, which I came to know as God, even if I wasn't in touch with that, I had felt it once. And I knew it was there because I felt it go back inside me. So deep down inside me, I had that presence. I had that love for myself. Even on the days when I couldn't feel it, I still knew it was there. And I think that God gives all of us some experience like that, where we know the presence, that it's inside us. We know that it's there. For some people, it happens very, very early in life. They have their spiritual experiences very early, and other people, it may take a little bit longer. But I believe we all have that. So we know what that presence is inside. We know at some level that God lives within us. And that was, I never really heard anybody say that before until I came to Unity. And the day that my first day that I went to Unity was, many of you know, was in Somerville, and I went to a service there. And I felt like many people do their first time at Unity that they've come home. And that coming home is that realization that that truth that's within you, you recognize it because it is within you. Otherwise, you couldn't recognize it. And since everybody has that experience when they come to Unity, that even more convinces me that we have that within us all the time. And so, living in the presence is a matter of just allowing it to happen. I came across a meditation that I used yesterday for a student that I had. And the meditation was called Allowing, a meditation for healing. And I played it before, she came, and it was just that. It was like, okay, we're here, we're going to relax, we don't have to do anything to heal ourselves. We're just going to, and it was the whole thing of sitting here and being grounded and allowing and opening up to it and everything. There was like nothing to do. And I thought, what a wonderful meditation, because there really isn't anything to do. You don't have to make any plans. It's all been already done for us. You just have to let it happen. Myrtle Fillmore is our next quote. Our part is to consecrate our senses to the truth and train our thought children to express joy, love, faith, wisdom, life, and health. It's one of my favorite quotes by Myrtle Fillmore. And of course, the reason I love that quote is because she refers to our thoughts as thought children. Meaning that you have to watch them like you do a child, and you have to give them some guidance or train your thoughts, as we say in Unity. And she then says, we want all of our thoughts to express joy and love and faith and wisdom and life and health. Every thought that you think, that you let in to your brain, and that you may express, but first you got to let it in there, because that's where the thought forms. She wants it to be joy, love, faith, wisdom, health, and life. What a wonderful, wonderful quote that is, isn't that? And Myrtle was the one who always said, watch your thoughts, watch your thoughts. And there's a really wonderful story about Myrtle to do with spiritual practice. And of course, she was, really big on affirmations and denials. And people would write to her, and they would ask for an affirmation, or they would say the one they had and ask her and tell her about their health problems and things like that. And she was a great correspondent. She wrote it. There's a book entitled that, about Myrtle's healing letters. Great book. So one of them that's in that book, this one writes to her, and she's complaining. Well, I did my affirmations, and I did all this and everything. I did everything you told me to, and I still have such and such. And Myrtle wrote across the letter, do it again. She sent it back to her. Do it again. Which is just the same thing as practice, practice, practice. If you don't have your results, it might not be that you're doing anything wrong. It's just that you haven't done it enough. You haven't corrected those patterns, those ruts in your mind. There's a wonderful story in the Quest magazine, and it's about a sign in Alaska. And there the soil heaves and thaws and freezes. And so some of the roads that are dirt get these big ruts in it. And the sign at the beginning of this road is, choose your rut carefully. Choose your rut carefully. You're going to be in it a long time on this road. And you can say the same thing about life. Choose your rut carefully, because your life's going to be quite long. And do you want to be in that same rut all the time? So Myrtle says, watch your thoughts. Watch your thoughts. Be aware of your thoughts. And the only way we can be aware of our thoughts is if we are in that present moment. We're not doing things rotely. We're just conscious. What am I thinking right now? What am I thinking about this thing that I have to do in the next hour or so on? What is going on in my mind that I'm thinking? Because the mind's already thinking. Whether you're aware or not, it's going on. And then it's setting your life for you, instead of you knowing what the thoughts are and making sure they're joyful and loving, full of health, full of life. So our next quote is from Marianne Williamson, and it's a wonderful, wonderful quote. It says, the goal of spiritual practice is full recovery, and the only thing you need to recover from is a fractured sense of self. So what does she mean by that? A fractured sense of self.
You've forgotten who you are.
That's right. We've forgotten who we are. That's right. We think we're Arlene, or we think we're Laurie, or think we're Linda. We're separated from God. We've forgotten our spiritual self. Even the way we express, like the New Age is body, mind, and spirit. I always thought it ought to be spirit, mind, and body. But spirit's on the tail end. Oh yeah, we'll get to that sooner or later. After we, beautify our bodies and educate our minds, then we'll get to our spirit, That's how my mind works. It's a little weird. Because our spirit is that which passes on into eternal life. The rest of it just is not there. We don't take any of the rest of that with us. So what Marianne Williamson in the Course in Miracles is saying is that is what we need ultimately to recover and to heal, And that's that feeling separated from God. We need to feel like we're a part of God. We need to believe that we are that, is what we need to do. I never heard that either till I got well into unity. Well into unity. So, how do we do that? Practice. Very good. You've been listening. All right. Good to know.
Well, awareness helps.
Right. Practice. That's right. And you will be led, just like I am and all of us are, to the spiritual practices that you need to recover that part of yourself that's fractured. That part of yourself that believes that you're not a part of God. That's right. I feel so blessed to be in unity. I grew up in the Methodist Church, and although it was a wonderful experience for me growing up there, and provide a lot of community for me and so many, many, many things that are good, it left me with the idea, of course, as many very traditional religions are, that God is outside of myself. God's up there in the sky. And of course, our church also talked a lot about Jesus, but he was God also, and was up in the sky, and was totally unobtainable as far as I was concerned. I really had that thought. I can remember thinking that. Well, I could come to church and everything, but I could never be as good as Jesus. I could never do the things that he does. And that's the way I felt. I always felt inferior, always, to that. Because that was what we were taught. God was up there. And that was it. We said the Apostles' Creed. I don't know if I could still say it. I bet I could. But I remember the lines that said, "Sitteth at the right hand of God the Father Almighty, from whence he shall come to judge the quick and the dead." I mean, those are scary words to a kid, huh?
Yeah.
Really, think about it. I didn't even say the whole thing yet. But that judge the quick and the dead, I said, okay, I'm dead. I'm dead already. So when I first started going to Unity was in 1995, and so I had a lot, like I think a lot of us do, a lot of baggage that I brought with me in the form of beliefs that had to change in order for me to move forward in my life. Lots and lots of beliefs. I also came from what I would describe as sort of an adversarial family, meaning the way in which they related to each other and to the world was pretty adversarial. It wasn't like she said, loving, faith, wisdom, health. It wasn't like that. You argued with each other, and my father kind of ruled the roost, and, although it was very loving in some ways, it wasn't outwardly expressed like that at all, So it was always that loving, that understanding that although it was loving, it was still adversarial. And I would be in Unity many years before I attended a workshop that had that line in it, which is so wonderful, and that is, nothing is done to you, everything is done for you. And it just flipped my world right around, just like that, in that one line. Because I had always believed that things were done to us. You had bad luck, bad bosses, people that hated you. The world conspired against you. There was no way to get ahead. I know, there's some of you are smiling, so I know you've heard that stuff, right? But that's an adversarial approach to life. You've got to get out there and fight and win, and competition and all that stuff. And you can't get up a full head of steam because you can only go half court.
Exactly. Pass that ball.
Yeah, you got to pass it to somebody else who gets the credit. Really, think about it. So that's why I say I am so grateful to Unity and to have been that Unity found me. I didn't find it; definitely found me. I don't know why there aren't a million people here today.
Yeah.
In every Unity church, why are there not millions of people wanting to hear this wonderful, good news? that the world is not adversarial. It's loving and it's wonderful. And that presence lives right within you and within me and all of us. And we can see it when we look into each other's eyes. We can see the Christ there. How much better way is that to look at the world? But we have so many old ideas that are hanging out in the back there. So we have to practice to let go of some of those old thoughts and those old ideas so that we can move forward through the threshold of life with our hand on the doorway for our guidance. Just wonderful. I love unity. So let's go into meditation now. So just be very comfortable right where you are. If you'd like, you can close your eyes. If you have anything on your lap, you can take it off. Just set it aside for now. You can pick it up again later. Feel yourself sitting comfortably on the chair. There's no place to go, and there's nothing to do. Just be. Imagine you are walking out on the beach, and God says, go ahead, pick a grain of sand, any grain. No matter what grain of sand you choose, God is present in it. Since God is not subject to division or diminishment of any kind, God is completely present in that one little grain of sand. Furthermore, since the whole universe flows from God, is sustained by God, and subsists in God, you are holding in your hand a grain of sand in which you, along with the whole universe and everyone and everything in it, is wholly present. Surprised by such an all-encompassing oneness, you begin to get a little weak in the knees. Then God moves in to finish you off by suddenly expanding this awareness of realized oneness in all directions. Go ahead, God says. Pick a place, a situation, a circumstance in which you might find yourself. If you choose a wooded area, you see yourself in your mind's eye, surrounded by trees. God is there, inviting you to reach out and pick a leaf off one of the low-hanging branches. As you do, you realize you are holding a leaf in which the totality of reality is wholly present. No matter what you might choose, you realize you are choosing something in which God is wholly present, loving you, and all people and all things into being. Then God invites you to reflect on any aspect of yourself. No matter what aspect of yourself you focus on, God is there, wholly present in each breath, each thought and feeling, each turn of your head. You realize as you sit that God is present as the ungraspable immediacy of your sitting. As you laugh, God is there in your laughter. As you cry, God is wholly present in each tear that falls from your eyes. It does not matter what little thing you might choose within or around you. It might just be the thing that awakens you from your fitful dream of being separate from God, who is the reality of yourself and all that is real. In the silence, may each of us be so fortunate as to be overtaken by God in the midst of little things. In the silence, in the silence. May we, in having our illusory, separate self, slain by God, be born into a new, true awareness of who we really are, one with God forever. May we continue on in this true awareness, seeing in earth and every little thing we see, the fullness of God's presence in our lives. May we also be someone in whose presence others are better able to recognize God's presence in their lives, so that they too might know the freedom of the children of God. And so now just let this music bring you back from your meditation. Stretching a little, being aware of your seat and where you are. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes.